when they do show up, you show you care. It's not like we're going to say to this, I would never say to the, you know, as the board president or even as the superintendent, oh, we don't care about you. Enough, you know. Or it's got to be fine. I'm sure it's fine. You're overreacting. You would never say that. But a lot of times people say what they're thinking, they get it off their chest, they make sure the board knows their concerns, and they don't come back. However, if by answering that question, that principal gave them now they've got a cause. And I think as superintendent and as board members, you know, there's always going to be people who disagree with us for whatever reason. When do they start the cause? And that's what I think you have to avoid. I mean, you know, I think I live in White Copper, Rich is a superintendent, and a few years ago there were these emails flying around about custodial getting a custodial come, and you know, you would think they filled some board meetings, and I was just telling them, I haven't heard about it. You know, it was like it was cause du jour. Everybody came out. I don't, you weren't the superintendent then,
No.
so you know, good. But and I didn't go to any of those board meetings. But it was the cause du jour, and then I mean, I don't know. My kids go to school there frequently.
They're cleaner than they ever have.
Exactly, but so the cause went away. And I think as a board of ed, they don't realize that sometimes their actions and the questions that they ask back or the responses that they give can either make a situation better or a lot worse, but exponentially worse. You know, if they and school level leaders too, and also I guess the superintendent, if they ask us questions all the time, and if we don't use some of that good statesmanship, which is a better way than saying defer, then we can really, I think what we want to avoid is those causes that become, they get lives of their own. And, you know, we're all suddenly trying to kill people. Last year I was trying to kill kids. What?
Yeah, I know you did.
Yes.
So were we. So were a lot of people as a result.
I want to ask a couple questions about that too.
Oh, man.
I just would, you know, I think everything you said is right on. I think about, you know, one of the pieces that's helped me is when someone asks a question, regardless of how you answer it, and you have to be careful about answering it because you accept then the premise of the question. And often the premise of the question is the thing that
Is the problem.
is the problem, right?
And what do you just say? I'm not accepting your premise.
Well, I go into it with that mentality, right? So however I'm going to answer is, I always have to think about what the premise of the question is, right? And you always take on the emotion of the person, right? That you want them to be heard, but a lot of times you just can't accept the premise of the question.
But you can come out right there and say that, and say, you know, I don't necessarily agree with everything that you're saying,
Right.
but here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
You know, this walkway is unsafe, the grounds are broken, there's poison ivy all over the place, blah, 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 blah. All right. You know, I know the walkway you're talking about, and I'm not necessarily sure about everything that you're saying, but Mrs. Ferrari, our Jewish school principal, is here this evening. Mrs. Ferrari, tomorrow morning, would you go out there and take a look at that? Ask Mr. D'Agostino, the building head custodian, to go out there, get back to me, and then would you contact her
On the plan.
and at the end of the board meeting, would you make sure that Mrs. Ferrari has your contact information tomorrow? So I can actually do a quick.
Right, and then
Lock
they
it
see,
together.
and then, you know, the person who took the time out of their schedule and is missing American Idol to actually be at the meeting for one time
Right.
knows that, okay, they're not telling, I mean, nobody's saying that I'm right, although, but what they're doing is they're going to say they're going to look into it and there's a plan to get back to me.
And then in the meantime, I can deal with the principal offline and we'll find out that that walkway is actually a municipal easement and it's not the responsibility of the school district, but you don't want to say that in a public meeting.
Exactly. And you know what, that's a good point though, Jeff, because even when you know that that's because you can start doing this with municipality over so many things, or
Right.
other organizations, but even when you know that that's going to be the eventual answer, sometimes not making that the public answer, and by putting a process in place, investigation, report, it takes the pressure off, and it doesn't make you look like that you just threw it on the borough steps.
And you can meet them halfway. You can say, look, you talk to the person the next day. That's actually municipal property, but to your point, I did send Mr. Jones out with a pair of hedge clippers, and at least we clipped back the area so the kids can get through. Now, repaving it, that's something the municipality, I'm going to talk to the superintendent, we're going to make contact with the mayor. Let me work on that. but
Right.
there's only so much I can do to help you.
Exactly. And the person who came says, okay, my time wasn't wasted, it got cut, I know they're working on it, and sometimes they go away. Other times they don't, but sometimes they do. So superintendent and his board is a group, and this is where I often, before I was a superintendent, if I had to say that to the BA, I have a wonderful BA, and I said to her, I've actually only been in the executive session once or twice, because I came straight from the building level. I said, do I have an executive? Does the board president? I mean, like, I didn't know what I didn't know about executive session, but so much of our time is spent there, because so much of what we have to talk about is personnel and legal. And there was some talk about that was going to change, but so far it looks like we can still go personnel and legal and try to fit it a lot in there. But so much of our energy is spent, and really things get said in executive, sometimes they probably shouldn't be, but that's when the superintendent really gets to know the board, not at a public meeting. If we as superintendents are getting to know our board during a public meeting, then that's not a good idea. We're failing that. But we get to know our board as a group when we're meeting typically in executive session. And this is also the time, and maybe it's because I have a nice board, but this is the time they put the most pressure on me. Like, why isn't this happening? What's this? And how's this going to go? And, why didn't we do it this way? And what happened with that principal? And why did that teacher do this? And why didn't we tell kids when who their teachers was? This is when the real claws come out. And I think as superintendent, and as nice as board members are publicly, or at least many of them, this is when it gets to be the toughest, at least for me. I don't know if you guys are experiencing the same thing. And one of the things I physically, I tell myself, self-talk.
Stay calm.
Stay calm. Don't let them see you sweat. Go back to Rich's. They have the premise, right? Sometimes I have to go back and say, okay, well, you're seeing this, but let me give you the history. Now, I was a history teacher. I have one board member who says, we know you were a history teacher, but to say, why can't we fire that teacher? And I have to say, well, there's something in New Jersey called tenure. And we can bring up charges, but these are the reasons you can bring up charges and those kind of things. And that I think is the toughest thing, but it is. If we get mad at them, I've also had colleagues tell me about getting upset with their board, marching out of meetings. I was actually not in the executive session, I was sitting out, I was a principal, and the BA got so mad at the board because I guess they were hounding him about something. And he threw down his stuff and stormed out while we were all waiting to come in. So the reporter, the public, and all the staff were waiting, saw that all happen. And I always remember, okay, let's not do that. Because the reporter, obviously, the question, what the heck's going on in there that is that bad? So the tip that I thought of most is never let them see sweat. Try to be prepared. And recognize that this is where I feel like every once in a while the rug just goes right out from under me, because they bring up things that I didn't know were issues. And so what I try to do though is find out what the issue is and say, we'll talk about it offline, let's bring it back once I have more information about that. Because if suddenly they hate the science program, and I had no idea they hate it until we got into executive session, we should be talking about the science program anyway, but
Yeah, that's the problem for me.
yeah.
But you can use that, you can say, look, first of all, I didn't know you wanted to talk about this tonight. In the future, do me a favor and let me know in advance so I can be prepared. Second of all, guys, this violates the sunshine laws. Let my people do back work on this, and then we'll bring it in the right forum, and I'll talk to anybody offline about it. But we can't talk about this right now.